The cosmic decay was accelerating beyond anyone's worst predictions. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker watched from the last operational observation post as entire star systems simply vanished from existence, leaving behind empty patches of space. That hurt to look at directly. "Sir, we've lost contact with 70% of our monitoring stations," reported Ensign Kelly Brooks, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. "The quantum distortions are spreading faster than our models predicted." Steve studied the tactical display showing the expanding dead zones throughout the galaxy. What had started as isolated pockets of instability had grown into vast regions where the laws of physics no longer functioned properly. Ships that entered these areas simply disappeared, not destroyed but erased from reality itself. "Any word from the human fleet?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Kelly shook her head. "Commander Taylor's message reached us 6 hours ago, but we have no way to contact the main fleet. They're too far out in the void, beyond the range of our communications." Steve looked at the message transcript on his screen. Ryan Taylor's discovery of the Architect ruins had confirmed their worst fears. Humanity hadn't just been protecting alien civilizations from each other, they had been protecting reality itself from collapse. Their moral choices and ethical decisions had somehow served as anchor points for the fabric of space-time. Dr. Ashley Turner looked up from her research station with exhaustion written across her face. She had been working without sleep for 3 days trying to understand the mechanism behind the cosmic breakdown. "Steve, I think I understand what's happening," she said. "It's not just about consciousness or moral choices. It's about the act of making those choices under pressure." "What do you mean?" Steve asked. Ashley pulled up a holographic model showing the quantum structure of spacetime. "Reality exists in a state of constant flux at the subatomic level," she explained. "Most of the time, these fluctuations cancel each other out and everything remains stable. But when a sufficiently advanced consciousness makes a moral decision that affects the lives of millions or billions of beings, it creates a kind of quantum echo that reinforces the stability of spacetime." Steve studied the model as Ashley highlighted specific points where human decisions had created these stabilizing echoes. Treaty negotiations, military interventions, diplomatic resolutions. Each major human choice had sent ripples through the quantum substrate of reality, strengthening the universe's ability to maintain coherence. So every time humanity chose to protect a weaker species or prevent a war, we were literally holding the galaxy together, he asked. "Exactly," Ashley confirmed. "The universe doesn't care about politics or morality in an abstract sense, but when conscious beings make choices that preserve order and protect life on a galactic scale, those choices resonate through the quantum field and help maintain cosmic stability." The implications were staggering and humbling. Humanity had spent centuries complaining about being the galaxy's policeman, never realizing that their role was far more fundamental than anyone had understood. They weren't just keeping peace between species, they were keeping reality itself from falling apart. "Dr. Turner, I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations in the galactic core," called out technician Carl Adams from the sensor array. "Whatever's happening there, it's getting worse." Ashley moved to the long-range sensors and studied the readings. The energy signatures coming from the center of the galaxy were unlike anything in their database. It was as if the supermassive black hole at the galaxy's heart was consuming not just matter and energy, but the fundamental structure of space itself. "The collapse is reaching critical mass," she said quietly. "Once the galactic core becomes unstable, the effect will cascade outward at light speed. We'll have maybe 6 months before the entire galaxy becomes uninhabitable." Steve felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on his shoulders. 300 million humans scattered across the void between galaxies, probably unaware that their former home was dying. And here he was, one of the last people in position to witness the end of everything they had once protected. Meanwhile, in the void between galaxies, Director Carl Adams was dealing with his own crisis of conscience. The reports from the Deep Space Scouts had been getting more disturbing by the day. Other galaxies that had once teemed with life were now dark and empty, their stars burned out or consumed by expanding zones of nothingness. "Carl, you need to see this," called out Scout Captain Dan Foster from his exploration vessel at the edge of their new territory. I've found the remains of another galaxy, but it's not what we expected. The transmission from Dan's ship showed a vast field of crystalline structures floating in space where a galaxy should have been. The crystals pulsed with a faint inner light, and as Carl watched, he realized what he was seeing. "Those aren't crystals," he said into his communicator. "Those are the compressed remains of entire star systems." Dan's voice came back filled with awe and horror. "Carl, I'm reading massive quantum signatures from these structures. It's like the galaxy didn't just die. It was transformed into something else entirely." Carl studied the sensor readings with growing dread. Each crystalline structure contained the quantum echoes of billions of conscious minds, preserved in a form that existed partially outside normal space-time. It was as if an entire galaxy's worth of intelligent life had been compressed into these strange artifacts when reality collapsed. "Dan, get back here now," Carl ordered. "Don't try to collect samples and don't get any closer to those structures." As Dan's ship turned back toward human space, Carl contemplated the horrifying possibility that this was the ultimate fate of all galaxies that lost their shepherding species. Not destruction, but transformation into something that was neither fully alive nor completely dead. Back in the Milky Way, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Captain Amy Rodriguez had moved the observation station 3 times as the expanding dead zones consumed their previous positions. Each jump took them further from the galaxy they were supposed to be monitoring. "Amy, we're receiving something unusual," reported Dr. Nathan Cross from the communications array. "It's not a normal transmission, but some kind of quantum resonance signal. It's coming from inside the dead zones." Amy moved to Nathan's station and listened to the strange harmonic patterns flowing through their instruments. It sounded almost like voices, but voices that existed in dimensions their equipment could barely detect. "Can you clean up the signal?" she asked. Nathan worked at his controls for several minutes before nodding grimly. "Amy, I think these are the consciousness patterns of everyone who died when reality collapsed in those regions. Their minds are somehow preserved in the quantum substrate of space itself." The voices became clearer as Nathan adjusted the filters. Amy could hear fragments of alien languages, desperate calls for help, and what sounded like warnings about something approaching from the galactic core. The dead were trying to tell them something important. "They're saying that the collapse isn't random," Nathan translated. "Something is directing it, feeding on the quantum energy released when reality breaks down, something that lives in the spaces between dimensions." Amy felt a chill of pure terror run down her spine. The cosmic breakdown wasn't just a natural consequence of humanity's departure. It was being orchestrated by something that existed in the void between galaxies, something that fed on the destruction of entire civilizations. "Nathan, send an emergency transmission to the human fleet," she ordered. "Tell them that the galaxy is being deliberately consumed by something from outside our reality. If they're going to come back, they need to do it soon." As Nathan composed the desperate message, Amy looked out at the dying galaxy and realized that humanity's choice was no longer between returning to their old role or starting fresh in the void. They were faced with a cosmic predator that would eventually consume every galaxy in the universe unless someone found a way to stop it. The void had indeed grown loud when humans walked away, but now Amy understood that the sound wasn't just the galaxy crying out for its lost protectors. It was something ancient and hungry, awakening from its slumber to feast on the collapse of reality itself. Dr. Sophie Blake brushed the ancient dust from the carved symbols on the wall and felt her heart race with excitement. The ruins they had discovered in the void between galaxies were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The architecture was impossible, with corridors that seemed to bend space itself and chambers that appeared larger inside than outside. "Sophie, you need to see this," called Commander Ryan Taylor from the next chamber. His voice echoed strangely in the alien structure, as if the walls were made of something that absorbed sound differently than normal matter. Sophie made her way through the twisting passages to where Ryan stood before a massive holographic display. The device had activated when they entered the chamber, responding to their presence with technology that seemed millions of years beyond even human understanding. The hologram showed a galaxy slowly rotating in space, its spiral arms clearly visible. But as Sophie watched, The galaxy began to change. Stars started winking out one by one, spiral arms collapsed inward, and entire sections of space simply vanished into nothingness. "It's a historical record," Ryan said quietly. The previous owners of these ruins documented the death of their home galaxy. Sophie studied the alien text scrolling beside the holographic display. The translation software in her suit was making progress with the language, but it was slow work. They called themselves the Architects, she said, and according to this, they served as guardians for their galaxy for over 3 million years. Ryan moved closer to the display. "Guardians of what?" "Everything," Sophie replied, reading more of the translated text. "They maintained peace between species, prevented wars from escalating, protected weaker civilizations from stronger ones. It sounds exactly like what humanity was doing in the Milky Way." The hologram shifted, showing new images of the architects themselves. They were tall, elegant beings with crystalline features and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. The text described how they had grown tired of their role as galactic protectors, worn down by countless centuries of thankless service. "Look at this," Sophie said, pointing to a new section of text that had appeared. "They grew weary of being treated as servants by the species they protected. The other races took their protection for granted and criticized their methods while demanding their help." Ryan frowned as he read the translated words. "That sounds uncomfortably familiar." The hologram changed again, showing the final days of the Architect's galaxy. Sophie watched in horror as reality itself began to break down. It wasn't war or disaster that destroyed their home, but something far more fundamental. Space itself started to unravel. Stars collapsed into dimensional holes and entire solar systems vanished as if they had never existed. "According to this," Sophie said, her voice barely above a whisper, "the collapse began exactly 1 year after the architects departed their galaxy." Ryan studied the display with growing alarm. "That can't be a coincidence." Sophie continued reading. The ancient text, her translation software working frantically to decode the complex symbols. The architects discovered something called the convergence effect. Apparently, advanced civilizations don't just maintain political stability in their galaxies. They actually serve as anchor points for reality itself. "What do you mean by anchor points?" Ryan asked. Sophie pulled up additional sections of the historical record. "Consciousness shapes reality at the quantum level," she explained. "When a species reaches a certain level of development and takes responsibility for maintaining cosmic order, their collective consciousness helps stabilize the fabric of space-time itself." The implications were staggering. Ryan looked at the holographic galaxy as it continued its slow collapse into nothingness. "Are you saying that intelligent life actually holds the universe together?" "Not all intelligent life," Sophie clarified. "Only species that achieve a certain level of moral and technological development. Species that take responsibility for others, that maintain order and justice across vast regions of space. The architects call them shepherding species." Ryan felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. "And when a shepherding species abandons their role?" Sophie pointed to the collapsing galaxy in the hologram. "Reality starts to break down. Without conscious minds actively maintaining cosmic order through their choices and actions, the universe begins to forget how to hold itself together." Meanwhile, back at the edge of the Milky Way, Captain Amy Rodriguez was seeing the first signs of the same phenomenon. The quantum disturbances that Dr. Nathan Cross had detected were spreading faster now, creating dead zones in space where the laws of physics seemed to operate differently. "Captain, we just lost contact with the observation post in Sector 12, reported Lieutenant Sarah Young. Their last transmission showed massive spatial distortions in their area. Amy studied the tactical display as another monitoring station vanished from their network. The pattern was becoming clear now. Every station that disappeared was located in a region where humans had maintained a strong presence for decades. "Doctor?" Cross looked up from his analysis station with haunted eyes. "Amy, I've been comparing the disturbance patterns to historical human activity records," he said. "The correlation is perfect. Every single quantum anomaly is centered on a location where humans made significant moral or ethical decisions. What kind of decisions? Amy asked. Nathan pulled up a detailed map showing the locations of quantum disturbances overlaid with historical data. Treaty negotiations, war crimes tribunals, peacekeeping missions, diplomatic interventions. Anywhere humans chose to uphold justice or protect the innocent, we're now seeing reality become unstable. Amy stared at the map in disbelief. You're suggesting that human moral choices were somehow holding space together? I know how it sounds, Nathan said, but the evidence is overwhelming. Human consciousness wasn't just maintaining political order in the galaxy. It was maintaining cosmic order. Back in the void, Sophie Blake was making the same terrible discovery as she decoded more of the architect's records. Ryan, look at this section, she called out. The architects tried to return to their galaxy when they realized what was happening, but it was too late. The hologram showed the final attempt by the architects to save their dying galaxy. Their ships, far more advanced than anything humanity had ever built, tried to penetrate the growing zones of spatial instability. But the breakdown of reality had progressed too far. The returning architects were consumed by the very chaos their absence had created. The collapse becomes self-sustaining after a certain point, Sophie read from the ancient text. Once reality loses cohesion over a significant portion of a galaxy, the damage spreads exponentially until the entire structure collapses into what they call the void state. Ryan felt sick as he realized the implications. Sophie, how long ago did we leave the Milky Way? 8 months, she replied. And how long did it take for the architect's galaxy to reach the point of no return? Sophie checked the timeline in the historical record. 14 months after their departure. They stared at each other in horror, both doing the same terrible calculation. Humanity had left their galaxy 8 months ago. If the pattern held true, they had less than 6 months before the Milky Way reached the point of no return. Ryan activated his communication system and tried to establish contact with the observation station at the galaxy's edge. The transmission would take hours to reach Captain Rodriguez, but they had to warn her about what they had discovered. Amy, this is Ryan Taylor, he said into the communicator. We found evidence that humanity's departure may have triggered a cascade failure in the fabric of space-time itself. The galaxy may be dying, and we might be the only ones who can stop it. As Ryan sent his message into the void, Sophie continued, studying the architect's records. Deeper in the ruins, she found evidence of other shepherding species from other galaxies, all of whom had eventually abandoned their roles and witnessed the cosmic consequences of their departure. The universe is vast and old, she read from one particularly ancient section. But consciousness capable of maintaining cosmic order is rare and precious. When such consciousness withdraws from its responsibilities, the universe itself mourns the loss. The final section of the architect's records contained a warning for any future species that might discover their ruins. Let those who come after us know the truth, the translation read. The universe requires shepherds, minds capable of making moral choices that resonate across the quantum substrate of reality. To abandon this responsibility is to condemn entire galaxies to dissolution. Sophie looked around at the empty ruins, the last testament of a civilization that had learned too late the cosmic significance of their role. Humanity was now faced with the same choice the architects had confronted millions of years ago. Accept the burden of maintaining cosmic order, or watch their home galaxy collapse into nothingness. But unlike the architects, humanity still had time to act. The question was whether they would choose to return to a galaxy that had never appreciated their sacrifice, knowing now that their sacrifice was more important than anyone had ever imagined. 6 months had passed since humanity vanished from the galaxy, and Captain Amy Rodriguez watched the chaos unfold from her position aboard the Terran Observer Station. The station sat at the very edge of the Milky Way, its long-range sensors pointed back toward the spiraling arms that humans had once called home. Amy adjusted the sensor array and frowned at what she saw. The hegemony of Krell had wasted no time in expanding their territory. Red markers on her tactical display showed Krell battle fleets moving through space that had been peaceful for decades. They were taking system after system without any resistance. "Captain, I'm reading multiple distress signals from the Zephyrian home system," reported Ensign Matt Collins from the communications station. His young face looked pale as he listened to the desperate messages flooding through space. Amy moved to his station and put on a headset. The voices speaking through the static were panicked and afraid. The Zephyrians were begging for help, calling out to anyone who might listen, but there was no one left to answer their calls. The Krell fleets reached their outer colonies 3 days ago, Dr. Nathan Cross said from his analysis station. Nathan had been studying galactic politics for 20 years, and Amy had never seen him look so grim. "The Zephyrians are trying to negotiate, but the Krell aren't interested in talking." Amy walked to the main viewport and stared out at the distant lights of the galaxy. Each point of light represented billions of lives, entire civilizations that had once seemed so permanent and secure. Now they were falling like dominoes, one after another. "What about their defense fleets?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Nathan shook his head. "The Zephyrians disbanded most of their military 40 years ago. They kept a few ceremonial ships for parades and official functions, but nothing that could stand up to a real attack. They've been relying entirely on human protection since before most of their current generation was born." The irony was bitter and obvious. The Zephyrians had once been one of the galaxy's most feared warrior races. Their ancestors had conquered dozens of star systems through pure military might. But centuries of human protection had made them soft and dependent. They had forgotten how to fight, forgotten how to defend themselves, forgotten that the universe could be a dangerous place. "Signal's getting weaker," Matt reported. "I think we're losing contact with the Zephyrian homeworld." Amy closed her eyes for a moment. She had served alongside Zephyrian officers during the peace negotiations in the neutral zone 5 years ago. They had been good people, intelligent and cultured, but they had treated human soldiers like hired help rather than allies. Now those same people were dying because they had never learned to protect themselves. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Luminar colonies in the Perseus Arm," called out Lieutenant Sarah Young from her station. "They're reporting raids by Skarathi battle groups." This was even worse news. The Luminar were completely pacifist, philosophically opposed to violence of any kind. They had beautiful cities and advanced technology, but they had never built a single warship. Their entire civilization was based on the belief that violence was primitive and unnecessary in an enlightened galaxy. Dr. Cross pulled up a holographic display showing the Perseus Arm. Dozens of Luminar colonies were marked in blue, while red arrows showed the advancing Skarathi fleets. "The Skarathi have been waiting for this opportunity for decades," he said. "They always resented the peace treaties that humans enforced. Now they're free to settle old scores." Amy watched the display update in real time as Luminar colonies went dark, one by one. Each disappearing light represented millions of beings who had chosen to trust in the goodness of the universe rather than preparing for its dangers. Their faith in peace was admirable, but it would not stop Skarathi plasma cannons. "Any word from the Galactic Council?" Amy asked. Nathan laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "They're holding emergency sessions every day, passing resolutions, and making formal protests. Elder Zixtar issued a statement calling for calm and diplomatic solutions. Meanwhile, half the galaxy is burning." The Galactic Council had always been better at talking than acting. During the human era, they would spend months debating while human ships were already handling whatever crisis had emerged. Now, with no human fleet to back up their words, their resolutions and protests carried no weight at all. "Captain, I'm detecting some kind of spatial anomaly in Sector 7, Matt reported. "It's not showing up on standard sensors, but the quantum detection array is going crazy." Amy moved to the quantum sensor station and studied the readings. Strange patterns of energy were rippling through space itself, like waves in a pond. She had never seen anything like it before. "Nathan, what do you make of this?" she asked. Dr. Cross joined her at the sensor station and studied the data. His frown deepened as he analyzed the patterns. "This doesn't make sense," he said slowly. "It's almost like space itself is becoming unstable in areas where humans used to patrol." Amy felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean, unstable?" "I'm not sure yet," Nathan admitted. "But look at this." He highlighted several areas on the display. Every one of these quantum disturbances is located in a region where human ships used to maintain regular patrols. The areas that humans never visited are showing normal readings. The implications were disturbing. Somehow, human presence had been doing more than just keeping the peace between alien species. It had been maintaining some kind of stability in space itself. Could it be related to human technology? Amy asked. Maybe our ships left some kind of residual energy signature? Nathan shook his head. These readings are too complex for that. It's like the fabric of space is responding to the absence of human consciousness somehow. Before Amy could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Matt's voice was tight with fear as he reported what his sensors were detecting. "Captain, we've got massive energy readings coming from the galactic core. Something big is happening." The main display showed a swirling mass of energy erupting from the center of the galaxy. It wasn't an explosion exactly, but rather a kind of implosion, as if space itself was collapsing inward on itself. "That's impossible, Doctor," Cross whispered. "The galactic core has been stable for millions of years." Amy watched the energy readings spike higher and higher. Whatever was happening at the center of the galaxy, it was unlike anything in recorded history, and it had started exactly 6 months after humanity's departure. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the remaining council members," Sarah reported. "They're asking if we know how to contact the human fleet." Amy almost smiled at the irony. For months, the council had been insisting that humanity's departure was a minor inconvenience that could be easily managed. Now they were finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what they had lost. "Tell them we're just an observation post," Amy said. "We have no way to contact the fleet." It was the truth, but it was also a convenient excuse. Even if Amy could reach the human fleet, she wasn't sure she would want to. Humanity had made their choice to leave, and they had good reasons for that choice. The galaxy had treated them as servants rather than partners, taking their protection for granted while criticizing their methods. "Captain, the quantum disturbances are spreading," Nathan reported. "They're appearing in new sectors every hour, always in areas that used to be under human protection." Amy stared at the spreading pattern of instability on the display. It looked almost like an infection, spreading through the galaxy wherever humans had once maintained order. The coincidence was too perfect to ignore. "Nathan, I want you to run a complete analysis of these phenomena," she ordered. "Compare them to historical records of human patrol routes, battle sites, and diplomatic missions. I want to know if there's really a connection, or if we're just seeing patterns that aren't there." As Dr. Cross began his analysis, Amy returned to the main viewport and looked out at the distant galaxy. The light seemed dimmer now, less bright than they had been 6 months ago. Maybe it was just her imagination, or maybe something fundamental was changing out there in the dark spaces between the stars. The galaxy was learning to live without humanity's protection, but Amy was beginning to suspect that humanity had been protecting more than just alien civilizations. They might have been protecting reality itself. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the ESS Liberty and watched the last evacuation ships gather in formation around Earth's moon. The massive fleet stretched across space like a chain of bright stars against the darkness. 300 years of human civilization in this galaxy was about to end, and Jake felt the weight of that decision in his chest. "All ships report ready for quantum fold activation," reported Lieutenant Kate Phillips from her station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the sadness underneath. They were all feeling it. This was home. Even if home had become a burden they could no longer carry. Dr. Lisa Carter walked up beside Jake and handed him a data pad. "Final count shows 47 million humans across the fleet," she said quietly. "Every last one of us is here." Jake nodded and looked at the numbers. 47 million people leaving behind everything they had ever known. The decision had not been easy, but it had been necessary. For 3 centuries, humanity had served as the galaxy's protectors, peacekeepers, and problem solvers. Every time a species faced extinction, they called for human help. Every time a war broke out between alien races, the Galactic Council expected humans to stop it. Every time pirates threatened trade routes, human ships were sent to deal with them. The other species had grown comfortable with this arrangement. Too comfortable. They stopped maintaining their own defense fleets. They stopped trying to solve their own problems. They just waited for humans to fix everything. And when humans asked for support or resources in return, the answer was always the same. We are peaceful beings and cannot involve ourselves in such matters. Admiral Ben Hughes appeared on the main screen from his flagship, the ESS Endeavour. His weathered face looked tired but determined. "Jake, we've been monitoring Council communications for the past hour," he said. "They still don't believe we're actually leaving. Elder Zixtar sent another message demanding we return to deal with the Krell expansion in the Outer Rim." Jake almost laughed. Even now, as humanity prepared to abandon the galaxy forever, the Council was still giving them orders. "What did you tell them, Ben?" "I told them that peaceful beings should be able to handle the situation without our violent, human ways," Ben replied with a bitter smile. Funny how quickly they change their tune when they actually need something done. The truth was that humanity had grown tired of being treated like hired soldiers while being despised for their methods. The other species called humans aggressive and warlike, but those same species were quick to hide behind human shields when danger appeared. They criticized human military tactics as brutal, but they never offered alternatives that actually worked. Dr. Carter pulled up a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked active conflicts, yellow zones showed tension areas, and green zones represented stable regions under human protection. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the display. 90% of the stable zones exist only because of human presence. The moment we leave, this whole structure collapses. "That's their problem now," Jake said, though he felt a pang of guilt as he said it. There were good species in the galaxy, innocent people who would suffer because of humanity's decision, but there were also the Zephyrians, who had once been proud warriors and now spent their days in luxury, while humans died protecting their colonies. There were the Luminar, who preached peace and enlightenment, while expecting humans to do all. They're fighting for them. Captain Tony Garcia's voice crackled over the communication system from the edge of the solar system. "Commander, we're picking up massive energy signatures from the direction of the galactic core. It looks like the hegemony of Krell is mobilizing their full battle fleet." Jake wasn't surprised. The Krell had been testing human resolve for years, probing human-protected space with small raids and attacks. They knew that once humanity left, nothing would stop them from expanding their empire across half the galaxy. "Let me guess," Jake said into his microphone. "The Council is probably debating whether they should send a strongly worded message of disapproval." "Actually," Tony replied, "they're demanding that we delay our departure to deal with the Krell threat first." This time Jake did laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Of course they are. 300 years of taking our protection for granted, and they still think they can order us around." Dr. Carter shook her head. "I've been studying the psychological profiles of the major species for decades," she said. "They've become completely dependent on us. The Zephyrians haven't fought a real battle in over 50 years. The Vortaki dissolved their military entirely 30 years ago. Most of these species don't even remember how to defend themselves." "Then maybe it's time they learned," Jake replied. "Our ancestors didn't have anyone to protect them when they first ventured into space. They figured it out through trial and error, and so can everyone else." Lieutenant Phillips looked up from her station. "Sir, we're receiving surrender offers from 6 different pirate clans in the neutral zone. They're asking for human protection from the other criminal organizations." Jake closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. Even the pirates wanted human protection now. The galaxy had become a vast nursery where every species looked to humanity as their parent figure, responsible for keeping them safe and solving their problems. Admiral Hughes appeared on screen again. "Jake, quantum drives are charged and ready across the entire fleet. Long-range sensors show clear space beyond the galactic barrier. Are you ready to give the order? Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These people had served with distinction, fighting battles and keeping peace in a galaxy that barely tolerated their existence. They deserved better than to spend their lives as unpaid security guards for ungrateful aliens. He thought about Earth below them, blue and beautiful and empty now, except for the automated systems that would maintain it in their absence. Maybe someday they would return, but not as protectors or peacekeepers. If they came back, it would be as equals or not at all. All ships, this is Commander Morrison, Jake said into the fleet-wide communication system. For 3 centuries, humanity has served this galaxy with honor. We have protected the weak, defended the innocent, and maintained peace between warring species. In return, we have been criticized, blamed, and treated as necessary evils rather than valued allies. He paused and looked out at the fleet of human ships waiting for his command. Today we choose a different path. We go to explore the space between galaxies to build something new and better. Let the species of the Milky Way learn to stand on their own feet. Let them discover what the galaxy looks like without humans to clean up their mistakes. Jake took a deep breath and gave the order that would change everything. All ships activate quantum fold drives on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. The space around Earth filled with brilliant light as 300 human ships tore holes in reality itself and stepped through into the dark void between galaxies. In seconds, the entire human race was gone, leaving behind only empty space and the echo of their final transmission. The galaxy suddenly felt much larger and much more dangerous than it had just moments before. President Michelle Grant stood before the assembled representatives of humanity in the great chamber they had built within the architect ruins. 47 million people had escaped to the void between galaxies, but now they faced a choice that would determine the fate of not just their species but the entire universe. The messages from Captain Amy Rodriguez had reached them 3 days ago, confirming their worst fears. The Milky Way was in its final collapse phase, consumed by something that existed in the spaces between realities. Dr. Sophie Blake's research into the architect records had revealed the true scope of the threat they faced. The entity they called the Devourer has existed since the early days of the universe, Sophie reported to the assembly. It feeds on the quantum energy released when galaxies lose their shepherding species and reality breaks down. The architects estimated that it has consumed thousands of galaxies over cosmic time. Commander Jake Morrison, now older and bearing the weight of humanity's exile, stood up from his seat in the front row. Sophie, is there any way to stop this thing? Sophie nodded grimly. The architects discovered a way, but it requires tremendous sacrifice. A shepherding species must not only return to stabilize their home galaxy, but they must evolve beyond their original role to become cosmic gardeners, actively maintaining the quantum substrate of reality across multiple galaxies. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had left the Milky Way to escape the burden of being galactic protectors, but now they were being asked to accept responsibility for the entire universe. Dr. Lisa Carter, who had spent the past months studying the consciousness patterns preserved in the quantum field, stood up to address the assembly. I've been analyzing the quantum echoes from the collapsed regions of our galaxy, she said. The beings who died when reality broke down aren't truly gone. Their consciousness patterns have merged with the fabric of space itself. She activated a holographic display showing the complex patterns of quantum resonance emanating from the dying Milky Way. Every species that was destroyed by the cosmic breakdown has contributed their knowledge and experience to a kind of universal memory bank. If we return and manage to stabilize the galaxy, we won't just be saving empty space. We'll be giving all those lost civilizations a chance to exist again in a new form. Admiral Ben Hughes, his face weathered by the responsibility of leading humanity's exodus, spoke up from his position near the front of the chamber. Even if we wanted to go back, the quantum distortions around the galaxy have made it almost impossible to approach. Our ships would be destroyed before we could reach the stable regions. Sophie smiled for the first time in days. The architects left us more than just warnings, she said. Deep in their ruins, I found the schematics for technology that can navigate through collapsed space-time. They called it the Reality Anchor Drive. She brought up new holographic displays showing impossible-looking ship designs that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human minds could barely comprehend. These ships don't travel through space in the conventional sense. They anchor themselves to stable points in the quantum field and pull reality back together as they move. Commander Ryan Taylor, who had been leading the exploration of the Architect ruins, stood to address the assembly. Building these ships will require resources we don't have and technology we barely understand, he warned. And even if we succeed, there's no guarantee that we can defeat something that has been consuming galaxies for millions of years. President Grant looked around the chamber at the faces of humanity's leaders, scientists, and explorers. These people had followed her into exile, trusting her decision to lead them away from a galaxy that had never appreciated their sacrifice. Now she was asking them to risk everything to save that same galaxy from a cosmic predator. "I won't lie to you," she said finally. "If we attempt this, many of us will die. We'll be facing something that exists beyond our understanding of reality itself. But if we don't try, the Devourer will eventually consume every galaxy in the universe. Our children and their children will inherit a cosmos of empty darkness." Dr. Ashley Turner, who had been monitoring the collapse from the observation station, appeared on the main communication screen. Her image was distorted by quantum interference, but her message was clear. "Michelle, the situation here is worse than we reported. The Devourer isn't just consuming our galaxy. It's using the energy from the collapse to open pathways to other galaxies. I'm detecting dimensional rifts forming throughout the local group." The assembly erupted in concerned murmurs. If the entity was already spreading to nearby galaxies, then humanity's window for action was closing rapidly. Jake Morrison stood up again, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded humanity's defense of the galaxy for decades. "I volunteer to lead the expedition back to the Milky Way," he announced. "Anyone who wants to stay here in safety has that right. But anyone willing to risk everything to save reality itself can join me." One by one, other leaders began standing up. Dr. Carter volunteered her research team. Admiral Hughes offered the entire military fleet. Sophie Blake insisted that her archaeological team was essential for operating the Architect technology. Within hours, more than half of humanity had volunteered for the mission. They would attempt to build the impossible ships, travel through collapsing space-time, and confront a cosmic entity that had been feeding on galactic destruction since the dawn of time. The construction of the Reality Anchor fleet took 3 months of desperate work. Human engineers struggled to understand technology that operated according to physical laws they had never encountered. The ships that emerged from their efforts looked more like living organisms than mechanical constructs, their hulls rippling with quantum fields that extended into dimensions beyond human perception. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, which they had named the ESS Redemption. Around him, his crew prepared for a journey that would take them through regions of space where the laws of physics had completely broken down. "All ships report ready," announced Captain Tony Garcia from the communications station. "The fleet consists of 12 Reality Anchor vessels and support craft carrying 50,000 volunteers." Jake nodded and opened a channel to the entire fleet. "People of Earth," he began. 8 months ago, we left our galaxy because we were tired of carrying a burden we never asked for. Today, we return not as reluctant protectors, but as cosmic gardeners accepting responsibility for the maintenance of reality itself." He paused and looked out at the strange ships surrounding them, their hulls pulsing with energies that existed partially outside normal space. "We go to face something that has devoured thousands of galaxies. We may not survive, but if we succeed, we will give consciousness and order a permanent foothold in a universe that tends toward chaos." Jake gave the order, and 12 impossible ships tore holes in the fabric of space itself, diving into the dimensional storm that surrounded their dying home galaxy. As they traveled through collapsed space-time, they began to see the true extent of the damage. Entire spiral arms had been consumed, leaving behind crystalline structures that pulsed with the preserved consciousness of extinct civilizations. But deeper in the quantum field, They also sensed something else, a vast intelligence made up of the merged consciousness patterns of every species that had died in the galactic collapse. The dead civilizations had not simply vanished. They had become part of the universe itself, waiting for someone with the power to give them form again. The final battle would not be fought with weapons or ships, but with consciousness itself. Humanity would have to prove that their commitment to order and justice was strong enough to hold reality together in the face of cosmic entropy. The universe had been waiting millions of years for a species capable of accepting this ultimate responsibility. The void that had grown loud when humans walked away was about to discover what happened when they returned, not as the same species that had left, but as something greater than they had ever imagined they could become.